It was supposed to be just another job. A few weeks of caring for an elderly woman, collecting a paycheck, and moving on. That was the plan. But sometimes life quietly rewrites our plans when we least expect it. Sometimes the family you are searching for isn't the one you were born into, it's the one kindness creates. The woman walked into that house believing she was only there to help someone else's mother. She never imagined that one simple act of compassion would change not only an old woman's life, but her own forever. Before we begin, if stories about kindness, hope, and second chances touch your heart, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to spread kindness, and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Your support helps us share more inspiring stories that remind the world kindness still exists. Emma was 32 years old and had spent most of her adult life taking care of other people. She worked as a home caregiver in a small American town, helping seniors who could no longer live alone. It wasn't glamorous work, but she loved it. Her patients often said she had a way of making lonely houses feel warm again. Still, Emma's own life felt painfully empty. Her parents had passed away years earlier, and after a broken engagement, she lived alone in a tiny apartment. Every evening she came home to silence. She smiled all day for others, but at night she wondered who would ever care for her. One Monday morning, her agency called with a new assignment. "There is an elderly woman named Margaret Lawson," her supervisor explained. "Her son lives out of state. She recently fell and needs someone to stay with her for a few weeks." Emma accepted immediately. When she arrived, she found a beautiful old house that had clearly seen happier days. The flower garden was overgrown. Paint peeled from the porch. Inside, family photographs covered every wall, but the rooms felt quiet, almost forgotten. Margaret sat in a rocking chair by the window. She looked at Emma with tired blue eyes. "So you're the new caregiver," Margaret said softly. Emma smiled. "Yes, ma'am. I'm only here to care for you." Margaret nodded politely. "We'll see how long that lasts." The first few days were difficult. Margaret barely spoke. She ate little and spent hours staring out the window. Emma noticed unopened letters stacked on the kitchen table. One afternoon, Emma gently asked, "Do you want me to read your mail to you?" Margaret shook her head. "They're all bills. Nothing worth reading." Emma didn't push. Instead, she cooked homemade chicken soup just like her mother used to make. She cleaned the dusty shelves without being asked. She even planted fresh flowers outside the front porch during her lunch break. When Margaret noticed the colorful flowers blooming a week later, tears filled her eyes. "My husband planted flowers every spring," she whispered. Emma simply smiled. "I thought he would like seeing them again." Something changed that day. Margaret slowly began telling stories about her life. She spoke about meeting her husband in high school, raising one son, and building the house together with their own hands. After her husband passed away, loneliness quietly settled into every room. "My son calls when he can," Margaret said one evening. "He's busy." "I don't blame him." But Emma could hear the sadness behind those words. One Saturday afternoon, Margaret's son, Daniel, finally visited. He looked exhausted. His suit was wrinkled from traveling, and guilt covered his face. "I'm sorry I haven't been here more," he admitted. Margaret squeezed his hand. "I know you're trying." Daniel thanked Emma before leaving. "I honestly don't know what Mom would do without you." Emma smiled politely. "I'm just doing my job." But deep inside, it no longer felt like just a job. Weeks passed. Then months. Margaret's health improved enough that the agency officially ended Emma's assignment. Her supervisor called. "You'll start with another client on Monday." Emma looked around Margaret's quiet living room. For the first time in years, this house felt like home. That evening, she gently told Margaret the news. Margaret stayed silent for several moments. Finally, she whispered, "I knew this day would come." Emma packed her bag that night, but something didn't feel right. As she reached the front door the next morning, she looked back. Margaret was sitting alone by the window again. The same lonely chair. The same empty house. Emma suddenly remembered how lonely her own apartment felt every evening. She walked back inside. Margaret looked surprised. "Did you forget something?" Emma smiled through tears. "Maybe." She took a deep breath. "I came here to care for your mother," she said with a little laugh, correcting herself. "Well, to care for someone's mother. I never expected to stay forever." Margaret's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "I've saved enough money. My lease ends next month. If it's all right with you, I'd like to keep helping. Not because I'm being paid." Margaret couldn't speak. Instead, she stood slowly and wrapped Emma in the longest hug either of them had felt in years. For both women, it felt like finding family again. Daniel couldn't believe it when he learned Emma had stayed. He offered to pay her privately, but she refused. "I'll accept enough to cover groceries," she smiled. "The rest. I'm here because I want to be." Inspired by Emma's kindness, Daniel made changes too. He arranged to work remotely several days each month. He started visiting every weekend instead of every few months. Together they repaired the old house. Neighbors noticed. One family brought homemade pie. Another mowed the lawn. Teenagers from the local church painted the fence. Kindness spread from one heart to another until the lonely house became the happiest place on the street. Months later, during Thanksgiving dinner, the dining room overflowed with laughter. Neighbors, friends, Daniel, and Margaret all gathered around one large table. Margaret looked at Emma with grateful eyes. "You came into my life as my caregiver." She paused before smiling warmly. But God had a different plan. Emma reached across the table and squeezed Margaret's hand. "No," she said softly. "I think kindness had the plan." Years later, people in town still talked about the little house with the bright flowers on the porch. Not because it was the biggest or the nicest house, but because everyone who entered felt welcomed. Children stopped by after school. Neighbors shared coffee every morning. No one felt alone there anymore. Emma often thought back to the day she first arrived, believing it was only temporary. Life had given her a paycheck, but kindness had given her a family. Sometimes the greatest gifts don't come wrapped in paper. They come disguised as ordinary moments, ordinary people, and ordinary choices to care when no one expects you to. If this story reminds us of anything, it's that kindness is never wasted. A single act of compassion can heal loneliness, rebuild broken hearts, and create families where none existed before. You never know whose life you're changing simply by showing up with love, patience, and an open heart. So wherever you are today, choose kindness. It may begin as a small gesture, but it could become someone's forever. And perhaps, just like Emma discovered, it might change your life too.